Welcome with Coffee with Kriolas. We're happy to have 3 guests here today, and it's also a man appreciation show today. And happy Father's Day to them also. We have with us today, we have Sam TEXEIRA, we have Philip OLIVEIRA, and we have Dr. Manuel Goncalves. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we really appreciate you guys being here and share your story with us.
So my name is Sam. I teach at the Henderson School in Boston, which is in the Boston Public Schools. It's a fully inclusive school, so there's students with and without disabilities in the same classroom. And in addition to my work there, I also run a young men's program called Strong Men, Strong Leaders. And the goal of that is to combat negative stereotypes about men of color, engage the young men in physical activity, community service, and also for them to just sort of dialogue about successes and challenges in their lives and neighborhoods.
Great, awesome, yeah. And Philip, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Absolutely. My name is Filipe OLIVEIRA. I am the president and founder of PERCIVAL beer company. We're one of the first ethnically owned craft beer companies based in the United States. We operate out of Dorchester, Massachusetts, but we're currently looking to expand more in Norwood, Massachusetts. Sorry. We just brought 5 brands to the market, and we plan on bringing in additionally 10. One of our niches is that we tend to develop and distribute ethnic-inspired craft beer to sort of introduce the whole craft beer movement to these burgeoning demographical groups that's sort of been left behind when it comes to naturally sourced organic craft beer. Yep.
And Dr. Manuel, so excited about that, the dictionary. Finally, we got somebody that have one out there, Cape Verdean Dictionary. That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Yes, my name again is Manuel Goncalves. I like people to say Deluge because there's so many Manuel Goncalves.
Right,
so,
yes.
I work for the Boston Public Schools for almost 36 years, and I'm retired now. And that's how I had some time to really work on this dictionary. It took me like 10 years. But finally it's done. The reason, of course, there are a lot of Cape Verdean Americans that need to learn Creole, and there was none. This is the first of its kind, so that's why it took me so long to do it. But finally it's done. There's an organization, my daughters and my nieces and my sons all got together, and we have an organization called Milimila. Milimila comes from the riddle, divination, Kuzamakuza Milimila. I'm here, I'm there, but behind that, it's more than that. It's imagination, it's words, we are everywhere. The word goes with wind, right. That kind of thing, the imagination. And that's why this dictionary is so important. It's all over the world, people like it. It's very positive, from Russia to California. It's amazing. Honolulu. People are buying online. People are interested. It's Cape Verdean, so it's to me it's beautiful. It's my contribution to the country, to the people of Cape Verde and to the diaspora. So I'm proud of being able to do it and then to share with you and to the world.
What exactly? Because they got to be like, they got to be that little click that inspire you to do that dictionary. There got to be something that kind of like inspire you, like, what, maybe we should have a dictionary and like in Creole.
Being an educator, I was an educator for 30 or so years, and then in the bilingual education too. So there's always was a need for people, and then people will ask, how come you don't have a dictionary? All the language groups have dictionaries, you don't. So that was my inspiration, so someday it will be done. And then always when I used to go to the conferences, to the curriculum development materials, and then people say, you guys don't have anything, so someday we'll have some. And that was some kind of inspiration to me because, we have to do it. And then it's us Cape Verdeans to do it. The Portuguese didn't do it for 500 years. So it's our alphabet, it's our language, it's all of us, men, women, and children. We gotta do as Cape Verdeans to So this is just a reference. It's just the beginning. It's about 40,000 words, but there's still a lot to be done. So my question to you all is that, for those people in college, in schools, the teachers, let's tell our children to continue to develop this language. It's such a beautiful language. In terms, Cesare Evra went to the world showing Cape Verdean language to the world, and all these other artists. So it's ours, and to me it's important. I'm glad I'm part of this movement. I'm part of the Mili Mila. We are everywhere.
Knowing the fact that we have different dialect back home,
Right.
What dialect is in that dictionary? What island? Because we have some Sint, Praia.
Yeah.
What?
It's basically all the dialects are here, but if we see, we can divide the dialects or the variations. We don't call dialects anymore. They call variations in linguistics. So there are two broad variations, and one is Sotavento, the other one is Barlavento. This basically Sotavento, because there were more resources in the Sotavento variation. I read like 220 books in Creole. They all were from Brava, Fogo, Santiago, and part of Mayo. Very few from Barlavento. So, and then I wasn't comfortable enough to do the Barlavento one, because you need materials, you need resources, and that's why. But it's, as I said, it's a beginning. It's a reference for the others to do the Barlavento variation too.
Just want to say congratulations, first of all, and thank you very much for sort of putting in the effort to devise this manual. I think we all need it because we're basically really fragmented internally within the community. I guess one of the core questions I have is that given the fact that we have Cape Verdeans from various different regions within the Cape Verdean Islands, such as like Fogo, Praia, or Brava, how did you go about trying to identify the right word to put in the dictionary? An example, I've heard two variations of cachupa and then manchupa. What process did you go through to sort of say to yourself, okay, this is the word that we want to put in the book and push forward as the right sort of word to use?
Well, you're right. We have so many variations, but to me the variations are the beauty of the language. It's like cachupa, for example, is made in San Vicente in different way, in Fogo different way, in Santiago different way, but it's cachupa anyway. So Creole is that same thing, the nuances, the variations are part of the language, but we have one language which is Creole, but with its variations. And these variations are beautiful, they are part of the language. So when we say, I have in this dictionary cachupa and also manchupa, because I wanted to give to the Cape Verdean Americans, those who are born here in the United States, that voice too. Because, here in the States, you go to Cape Cod or other place, they say manchupa.
Right.
And then we say cachupa, that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. And then manchupa is here in the dictionary too. Cachupa is also in the dictionary. So we wanted to have all the words because, there's nothing written before. So to me, anything that we can document, it's good for the posterity, for the other people that come be after us. So any variation that we had, it's here, especially because, I read all these books and then all those words were there. So I didn't want to left out anybody or any variation, especially from the Sotavento. So they're all here. Cachupa, like, the Jagacida, for example, here they say jag. It's explained a little bit about the jag, which doesn't correspond to Jagacida in Cabo Verde.
Exactly.
Jag here is what? Rice and beans. And Jagacida in Cabo Verde is it's cornmeal and things like that.
Yes, yeah.
So to me the variations are the beauty of the language. And then we should continue with these variations because all languages have variations. Even the American English, if we go to all America, it's more 200 variations. In the United States, English version. If you go, that's why it's American English, Jamaican English, Canadian English, British English, and so forth. So we cannot avoid variations. So we have to treat variations accordingly. And of course, we have to give, like Santiago, for example, it's the largest island, has more than half of the Cape Verdean population, so you have to start somewhere, like in Santiago. But all the variations are important for the language. In music, Cesaria sang all the variations, the Santiago, the Fogo, São Vicente, and so forth, and people understood it. And then she brought she's a messenger of the Cape Verdean language and the culture throughout the world. And then it's not just Cesaria, it's all Cape Verdean artists, it's all Cape Verdean writers, poets. We all part of this alphabet. We are all part of this language. And then it's our duty as citizens to continue to develop this language, which is so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
So I actually don't know whether to pose this question to Manuel or to one of you all, but I'm so used to seeing on talk shows like Oprah and Ellen, under the cushion there's like a gift. So is this under our cushion or?
We're gonna get a free one today.
But in actuality, and I want to preface this question, I actually have known Manuel for a couple of years now. He does a Kriolu class on Bowdoin Street, which I've had the honor of taking. And this speaks to something that he has just said, which I think it's so critical that as Cape Verdeans, we are incorporating all aspects of the Cape Verdean community. So my family's been in the United States for several generations in New Bedford. So I didn't grow up speaking Kriolu. I actually learned Portuguese in college and in Brazil. And it was very important for me as an American Cape Verdean to learn. And so I just wanted to sort of publicly say thank you for all the work that you've done, because I feel that it really puts us closer to our heritage. And I actually had the pleasure of going one time, and I felt much more enriched by having gone through taking his class a couple of times. And so speaking on that, I guess my question for you is, what happens when the current generation of Cape Verdeans, primarily in Boston and Brockton, who are first and second generation, how do we retain the culture and heritage and language so that 3 and 4 generations from now, the stuff that has happened to families like mine where we've lost the language doesn't occur? And is it inevitable?
Well, for 500 years, we maintained this language through cultural resistance. So from now on, I don't think Kriolu would die.
Well, I guess it should be in the United States.
Yeah. I see something new with this movement of Milimila. I've seen my own children and my own people from my own family, the excitement they have about this language. We went to Cape Verde, and then we broke the traditional system. We did a book launching, not in a university or a studio or somewhere, but we did it on plaza with children and people dancing batuco. And then all the people were involved, and they all were allowed to say something. And then there was the celebration of language and culture. And then we continue to do this here. And then we wanted people to participate. This language is not mine, it's ours, it's yours. And then we have that obligation to make it happen. As a parent, I have the obligation to teach it to my children, and then all of us. And then I think what's going to happen, because I have so many demands now. People want me to teach Kriolu at St. Patrick's in Roxbury to their children. I do teach Kriolu at different other levels. And then, to me it's important, because we don't have that Portuguese mentality anymore. Portuguese is our language, of course, but Kriolu is ours too. It's even more. For those of you who know Donald Macedo from Brava, and then the linguist, teaches at the University of Massachusetts in Boston, and then he said in Kriolu, português é de nós, português é emprestado, mas Kriolu é de nós. Kriolu is ours. So
That's
it's
so
up
true. That is so
it's
true.
up to us to make it happen. And then of course, the children of Cape Verdeans born in this country don't have that mentality, that Portuguese mentality that we adults have. So it's even better here in the United States, because in Cape Verde they still have that Portuguese, heavy Portuguese. Only now they have 6 schools that teach Kriolu, 3 in Santiago and 3 in São Vicente, just as a pilot experiment. So tomorrow I'll be interviewed by what's the name of television? Al Jazeera television, and this man went to Cape Verde to see what they're doing in Kriolu or regarding the Kriolu education, and then he's coming here to see what we're doing here with the dictionary and other things. So I think, you know, this is a start, and then we cannot stop anymore. And then there's no one else to tell us, stop it, don't write it, it's not a language. So it's up to us again. We have that commitment to do it and continue to do it. So in every enterprise company, there's always a beginning.
Yeah.
So how did you start your company? That's one question. And the other one, you know, you told us that you had the name of one of the beers was Compadre.
Uh-huh.
And why you select that name Compadre, especially with the K, which is the new alphabet too.
Right, absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, I started the business basically just as a hobby. I spent a significant amount of time, sort of like in my basement, just sort of experimenting and sort of just creating different types of beer brands, just beer styles, just sort of playing around and essentially just for myself, own personal consumption and friends and family. I did that for approximately 5 years, and probably about right around the 6th year, that's when I started contemplating about the possibility of bringing a brand to market. At that time, it was really challenging. It still is very challenging because you have to go through all the compliance issues with the federal government and also with the state government. And plus, it takes a lot of money to actually get something up and running. So once I started just brewing beer in my basement, just sort of experimenting and sharing with friends and family, that's when I started going through the process of trying to figure out exactly how to brand the product and bring it onto market. It was really hard because there's really no peers in the market to sort of reach out to say, could you give me some insight on how to go about this process? I think a lot of us envision Cape Verdean beers such as Estrella or some of the other beers like Bock, Super Bock, but those are European-owned institutions. They're not Cape Verdean owned, so that made it even more of a challenge for myself to take on that challenge to say maybe it's time to start thinking outside of the box and develop a manufacturing company that can actually bring various brands to market. As far as how I came about with the Compadre name, it was funny. I think I told you this earlier. I wish I had your dictionary when I was kind of going through that process, because I didn't know precisely what to name the brand at that time, because I think from a branding and marketing standpoint, we wanted something that was very catchy, but we wanted something that wasn't going to pigeonhole us or put us in a hole and say, you know what, this is too ethnic, I can't pronounce this, so I'm not going to bother with it. As far as finding the word compadre, I went through a lot of online research, and I found a document from UMass that actually tried to sort of create a small little database of Cape Verdean words, and one of the words that they had was compadre, but it was spelled with C-U-M, padre, P-A-D-R-E. I tried putting that on the label a couple of times, but it just didn't look right. I think, if anything, the first 3 letters, C-U-M, just sort of created a unique situation where I think people would probably think that would be comical in a sense. So, and then when I started looking back to our African roots, I said, you know what, C seems more of a European alphabet. I think K kind of gave it more of a strong presence, more of a stronger pronunciation. So we got rid of the CU and just added KO. So in that instance, then we had compadre, which kind of gives it a more masculine, more aggressive pronunciation, which was something we were looking for.
Just, I want to, if I may.
Sure.
The question of C, there's a lot of people ask why there's no C in the dictionary. As you know, this alphabet, it's phonetics. It's a phonetic alphabet. There's no need to have C. All the C words that sound S, it's S becomes S, and all the sound K becomes K. Like Kriolas, I see the coffee with Kriolas with K instead C. So a lot of people ask those questions. Of course, you know, they they have that right to ask the questions, but it's just to let you know that the C is only for international purpose, like centimeter, things like that. But all the other sounds like S, Sabola with S, and K, Criola, Compadre, that goes according to the pronunciation and the sounding. Sabola, Cell, no problem with that. So it's even easier to teach. Remember when Cape Verde became independent, 80% of the people couldn't read or write. So it's a way to teach people read and write in a faster way. And then Portuguese is one of the most complicated languages in the world because of so many sounds, so many different letters, like cozinha, exame, and then sometimes it's Z, sometimes it's S, you know,
Right,
it's very confusing.
Right.
So with this alphabet, we solve the problem somehow. It's one letter corresponding one sound, always like that, and then we have no problem in any of those variations.
Wow, that make things so much easier when it comes to, you know, the Creole writing, when you write Creole.
All right, so you brought some samples here. So can you show us what type of beers you have here?
Absolutely. So one of the challenging things that we have to deal with in the beginning from a branding and marketing standpoint is how do we basically make noise in a crowded space? Because there's already tons of different types of craft beer brands out there, but also commercially you have a lot of brands also. If you start looking at Budweiser and some of the European brands like Heineken and the Mexican lagers like Corona and Modelo. So for us, what we wanted to do was to sort of do standalone brands. We didn't want to name all the brands after the name of the brewery, such as Percival Brewery Lager or Percival IPA or Percival Porter. So by having standalone brands, we can target individualized demographical groups and sort of bring all these various groups to our tables and say, wow, so this company is doing something very unique. They're not really following the footprint as everybody else is doing. So what we brought in today was to sort of showcase some of our popular, yeah, absolutely. Some of our two flagship brands right now. It's called the Hip Hop IPA. It's an Indian Pale Ale with about 7% alcohol content. Now, if you guys know craft beer, they tend not to really celebrate the urban sort of culture or the urban atmosphere. Most of the brands on the market is more hippie-ish or sort of uses some sort of literary word that that's based on something European. For us, we took the IPA and we called it hip hop because hop is one of the main ingredients in beer. It's the fundamental actual ingredient in beer. And we made it fun. I think it's really fun and people can quickly reference the name. It's not something obscure and unique that you're not going to get familiar with. The second actually flagship brand that we brought in today is called Dot Ale, which is a dedication brand to the neighborhood of Dorchester, which is the neighborhood that I grew up in. And Dorchester really is a diverse, unique community. You have various ethnic groups from all over. You have various social classes also from different degrees. And it's a community that's it's the largest neighborhood in the city of Boston. So it made sense that if we were going to design any type of brand, it was going to be something that would celebrate the neighborhoods. And that's part of one of our branding strategies also, is that we have unique brands for every distinct neighborhoods that make up the city of Boston. Later on this year, we're going to bring out a brand for Roxbury, which is going to be called Pudding Stone Porter. That is a dark beer, just like Guinness, which a lot of folks enjoy. And for folks out there that don't know what Pudding Stone is the rock that's actually was cultivated from the community of Roxbury. That was used to sort of construct the basement of a lot of houses in the city of Boston. So if you walk around, you'll see these rocks sort of protruding from the ground. A lot of people call them conglomerate rocks because it's a fusion of rocks from different categories that sort of fused with each other over the years, over the decades and millennia, if you want to say it that way. And that's perfect. That's Roxbury, right? We have a conglomeration of different ethnic groups that sort of fuse to create this unique community. And that's exactly what we want to sort of perpetuate.
Okay, so Sam, we brought you on, as a guest. 2 of our guests are fathers. I brought you on because I know that even though you're not a father,
As far as I know.
Right. Exactly. But
That was a good one.
that was a good one.
No, I have 200 kids, I always say. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So, but that was the reason why I brought you on, was because you mentor young men who will one day become fathers.
Yeah.
So that's why I want you to speak out, to speak about your program and let everybody know what you're doing in the community to help out.
Sure, absolutely. So this is my 3rd year in the Boston Public Schools, but 2nd year as a teacher. I've been at the same school for the past couple of years now, and it had come to me and to many of the staff members that our administration felt that a lot of the young men of color needed support, social, academic, and so forth. And I think that there's sort of an enduring theme in many schools and classrooms here in the city and across the country of a need to demonstrate cultural competency. And it's not to say that some teachers have it and some don't, but the fact is that some do come with better skills than others, and we have diversity based on race, experience, neighborhood, and so on. And so they put this out there to see, well, is there any teacher that can think of anything to support our young men? And so well before I'd worked in Boston Public Schools, I had actually done a program city here in Boston where I worked in the classroom with a gentleman who had actually had a young men's program of his own over at the Tobin. And so I patterned a lot of what I had learned there or a lot of what I do now off of what I learned there, and obviously tailored it to the needs of high school students. In terms of what we do and success, I think that all young people, a lot of times they think they're in high school, they're too cool for this, but all young people want to feel a part of something and a part of a community. And so in Strong Men, Strong Leaders, I try to know when it's important for me to sort of speak up and to teach, and when it's important for me to take a step back. And you see that the students are naturally leaders in and of themselves when they have the opportunity. And so oftentimes, I put out an agenda, whether we're going on a college visit. We had a heroes brunch to honor father figures in their lives or male figures. We've done athletic competitions. And so you see people sort of naturally rise to whatever leadership capacity they're in. And the reason that we try to make the goal so diverse is because the young men in our classrooms are so diverse. And they all have different experiences and strengths and needs. But I think that the sort of guiding success is the building community and the building brotherhood. And, I was really appreciative of them sort of taking a risk with this because they knew me, for the past year or so. They knew my reputation as a teacher, but this was something new for all of them. And I like it because I'm able to grow as a professional and they're able to grow as well. I think that we're growing together and you sort of see them all flourish. And obviously, different students have different needs and some have more outward leadership capacities than others, but I would definitely say that they're building a strong sort of family unit within themselves. And I would hope that someday, well over 10 years from now, when they are fathers, that they keep that in mind for their own sons and daughters.
When you were a teenager, which family member would you go for advice?
Yeah, I guess I can start that. Yeah, good question. I think, my mom actually had to be a good point of reference. One of the things my mom told me a long time ago, and I appreciate this a lot from her, is that, and in the background, so my mom always says she escaped a famine in Cape Verdean Islands, made her way to Portugal, and then made her way to the United States, raised 8 kids, worked probably a low-paying job, but she always gave us great advice. And one of the best advice she ever told me was that one of the most priceless commodity in the world is not gold, oil, diamonds. It's actually information. Being well informed will prepare you for a lot of obstacles and challenges that you'll face in life. So from that message, I sort of figured out exactly what she was saying, is that you want to be well-educated, well-rounded. You want to be able to explore different things and absorb as much information as you want. And that will help you sort of tackle a lot of the issues we see today in society, because today's society is really complicated and complex. And And I think that's a good thing about Sam is the fact that he's helping out these young gentlemen sort of navigate these complex issues in society. It's a great thing.
Yeah, I guess it sounds cliche, but I would also say my mother. My mother's relatively young. She was 21 when I was born. And I think I value that now because I think that when she was my age, I couldn't imagine having a 6-year-old. But so it makes me sort of think as a teacher, there's one thing, but I couldn't imagine sort of being a parent at her age. But that being said, my mom, she gives really great advice. And I think that she knows the right balance between giving me good advice and also knowing me well enough to tell me when she disagrees with what I'm doing. And I think that like all teenagers, I took that with a grain of salt then, but I think I value it much more now. And I think I definitely go to her more for advice now than I did 10 years ago.
It's always a mom.
Right.
That's true. With my father, there was always a distance. That respect, we always grew up with scared of our father. Not because, they were not our friends, but, there was some kind of respect. You have to obey the parent, your father, and that's it, whatever he says. So that patriarchal role that, fathers played in Calvert. So with my mom, it was different because, although she had no schooling, but she had the life experience that taught me so much that still today, I go to her, although she's in another world, but that commitment that she had with us, that to be good, to be part of the family, because family in Cape Verde, that it's sacred. Your father, your mother, those are sacred that you don't play with them. But I learned something from my father that I didn't want to. I wanted my kids to be more friendly to me, because we were so distant, and then I didn't want that to happen to my children, and then my children love me because I have that kind of approach and proximity that we didn't have with my father, for example. So, mothers, again, you are the world.
Right.
Thank you.
So I have another question. Since you guys all went for advice for your moms, what was the hardest question you went to ask your mom, and how did that what's the hardest question you went to go ask?
See, with my mom was there was that trust. So if I wanted to ask something to my father, I always had to go to my mother, and then she would intervene before my father. So I had that what do you call it? Yeah, bond with my mom, and then I had no problem whatsoever regarding. I was so familiar. But with my father was a different one, always hard questions, would never ask him. My mother would be the mediator or the intervener to do the question to my father.
Well, that's a tough question. Well, I think the challenging thing for me was, I think as Manuel sort of pointed out, the relationship with the father was almost distant. The communication there was non-existent, and that's not their fault. I mean, I think if you follow the pattern, or some of these individuals coming from a pretty developing nation, coming into a really layered, complex society like the United States, and they then have to go through the process of trying to raise a family in this atmosphere, which is really challenging. I mean, the language barrier, the financial issues, the social issues. So it's almost expected that the father, being the leader of the family, would sort of encase themselves in a bubble and say, you don't know what I'm going through, so don't bother me, let me deal with this stuff. But what I really wanted to ask my mom was more about the entrepreneurial aspect, or being an entrepreneur or a business person. My father was more sort of had the more skill sets to be a business person. He was well business minded, but because that communication gap was there, it was hard for me to approach him and get insight. And my mom, being more of a down-to-earth individual, she didn't want to get involved in that sort of world, and she couldn't really provide me with any sort of useful information I could use. So I guess just for me, trying to talk to her, what was the most challenging thing was just trying to get her to give me feedback on how to deal with a lot of obstacles that we see here in the U.S. a lot, and how to navigate those issues. But she stuck with it as a soldier. Again, she was really informative. She kind of gave you a down-to-earth sort of response and say, look within yourself and focus within what you want to do and go that direction. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is a hard question. I guess the hardest thing to ask my mom is advice on women and girls, and because naturally, like, I think that opens the door to her being more nosy. And as I get older, it doesn't mean as much anymore as when I was younger. I would never ask her. And then, I guess speaking on that, I had a little medical scare once 5 years ago, and it was nothing. It was very minor. The doctors had done a blood test, and they had to do further tests to make sure of something. And I didn't know whether or not to tell her, and because she's very protective of me, but also very nosy. And so I made the mistake of telling her, and she was freaking out and afraid for like several weeks until the blood test came back that everything was fine. So, I've learned my lesson on that one.
Well, I want to thank you guys for being here, because I think Cape Verdean men don't have such a great reputation, and it's sad though, but I think I'm in awe when I see great stand-up men who are successful and are doing great things. But I do want to ask, what advice would you give to single fathers, sometimes part-time and full-time, on how to take care of their children?
I would say do it, and I would say your role means everything. And even though I'm not a dad, so it's hard to give advice on fatherhood, I do have at least 2 students who have single parent homes that are headed by dads. And I can tell you that both of those dads are very close to their children. And you can sort of tell that it means a lot to them. They're both raising sons. And I just couldn't imagine sort of what those young men would be like but for without their father. And so I think, and in one case, I know the father's sort of struggling, but that doesn't matter because the young man knows that there's love there. He knows that he can trust his father. I think as we had all answered about our moms being influential in our lives, dads can be very influential. And when I do have kids, I sort of want to follow your advice, which is to not be the sort of stern, distant father. And so I think about my relationship with the young people. And, I'm very stern with them in the classroom, but they also know they can come to me for anything. We joke about things. And so I would say balance that, balance well, having high expectations of your son and demanding excellence, but also being a figure who's funny and who's loving and who your kids can go to, because the kids really see it, even if they don't always necessarily say it.
Yeah, raising a child in today's society is really, really challenging. It's really tough. There's a lot of external factors that sort of influence the relationship. You have social media, you have the internet. Facebook alone, kids can get bullied through that sort of platform. So it's really hard to try and get them to zone out and sort of isolate those external factors and focus mostly on the relationship between the father and son. I tell my son all the time that what I'm doing now as far as trying to build a manufacturing business is to help us build a legacy, but also protect the community in the sense that we want people out there to know that the Cape Verdean community is a strong, independent, educated, professional community. And we have to make those sacrifices to sort of get that message out there. What I mean by sacrifices, we essentially have to put ourselves in an entrepreneurial bubble and sort of isolate a lot of social other issues going on and focus specifically on that. As far as raising a child, I spend a lot of time with my son. I essentially keep him in the house, and I keep him beside me all the time. And I try to share as much information with him about obstacles in life, what we have to deal with, particularly when it comes to finance and dealing with the opposite sex when that time does arrive. But for me, being a business person, I focus a lot of my efforts as far as trying to educate him about money. Because I think a lot of people don't understand the aspect of money when they become adults or in college. You got the credit cards, you got the debt, you got your paycheck, but if you don't know how to micromanage those things, you can quickly find yourself in a compromising situation. So everybody has a unique skill set when it comes to being a father. The thing I tell a single dad is that don't give up. Keep in mind that that child is going to be your legacy if you pass away. That is a piece of you that's left on this planet at this moment in the future. So whatever message or whatever image, whatever sort of education you present to them, they're going to pass that along to the next generation, whomever that might be. So don't leave them alone because they're going to be lost in the wilderness. Pull them in and educate them as much as possible and try as hard as you can. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Nowadays, it's kind of difficult, even the relationship between parent and father and a son. Especially in this country, I'm looking back to Cape Verde, for example, that, we had all the values, the respect and so forth. But here, because of the society is so complicated, and parents usually don't have that power they had in Cape Verde. So, but you gotta know how to cope with those kind of situations. Give you an example of my own son that he's about 20, 21 now. He didn't want to go to college. I want him to go to college, but he said no. I don't want to go to college now, maybe later, but I want to experience life. Which, is right in a sense. He has some social skills. He deals with society. It's complicated, but at the same time, he comes back to me asking questions, what I think and so forth. But sometimes, and then he's right sometimes. He said, well, why are you going to college now and then spending all that money and then later on you don't even find a job? And then you have to pay $40,000 a year or so. But he has that thing. So I think, sometimes, we as parents need to understand that too, that, we have to allow people to have to live their own experience, their own life, and then learn from that experience. That's important. And then as a parent, I'm trying to do that, I cannot be a dictator, like my father was a dictator in a sense. I have to be pleasant to him and understand. Because, if you have that relationship with your children, somehow it stays after they're grown up. And then, they come back and say, well, my father was right. But you have to facilitate and let it happen so you won't create conflict. Because, I think, it's in a family when there's conflicts, and then when you start hating each other, that's no good. It's no good because it continues on in life, and it's something that if you can contribute for a better society, you need to have that understanding as a parent, and then make sure somehow the values will stay, and then even if they don't stay now, but in a later date, they'll come up with that value, understanding, and behave that way.
All right, so before I ask my question, I do want to say that you were saying earlier that growing up, your relationship with your father, and I think the way the culture grew up, was kind of distant. So I do see with generations, there's trying to break the mold with that. I know with my father and my stepfather, as a young woman, I think it was really important that my dad gave me a lot of confidence. And I felt like that was such an amazing thing that he did, because I feel like I'll never have to search with that within a man, because I feel like he gave me that love and that inner confidence that I needed. So I think that was awesome. But I know years ago it wasn't really like that. So what are you doing now as a father to break the mold of the traditional way?
I think you hit it on the head. It's just having a more an open relationship, better communication, and I think that's what was missing from some of the previous generations as far as fathers. There was just really no effort on their part, and I understand. I mean, I think if you put yourselves in their shoes and kind of go through that whole process that they went through, you can see why there would be a rigid sort of attitude when it comes to building that great relationship with your kids. But now that most of us are embedded in the American culture and we've gone through the whole aspect of being a Westerner and being a consumer, we know what's out there. We have access to the internet and we see what sort of issues are affecting individuals and kids and adults also. So for me, once I see those things, I automatically open up my life and welcome in my kids and say, this is what I've went through and this is where I'm at now, and I'm here whenever you guys need me. And as far as building confidence, I think it's all about challenges. You push them and you ask them to take on the challenge that they never thought that they would do or take on, and once they succeed, be there to celebrate with them, be there to give them that hug and that high five or that kiss on the cheek. It's just like my 11-year-old son. He graduated from 5th grade the other day, and typically when I'm home, I'm always picking him up and hugging him, but when we were in public, he's like, don't do that, I'm too big for that. So, but nevertheless, you try to do that, to let them know that you still care for them. So
yeah, I guess the education is very important. Unfortunately, our parents were not able to have the education that we have today. And then that made a difference, because when you're educated, you see the world in a different perspective, a different view. So I personally don't blame my father at that, because, the society was like that, especially us that we grown up in a Portuguese society, dictatorship society, all that contributes for the family to be behaving in that way. But here in the United States, for example, kids have too much to. I wish I didn't buy all those PlayStations, all that games to you, because they take everything for granted. That's why my child didn't want to go to college, because he had everything. So sometimes when we grew up in Cape Verde, we didn't have that opportunity to have, and then we saw education as the key to success and so forth. That's why you see immigrants come to America with that in mind. I want to go to college, I want to be somebody, I want to study and so forth. And kids here, unfortunately, don't have that aspiration, because they have everything for granted. They take everything for granted. And it's that difference that we as parents sometimes need to go back, reflect a little bit, and say, no, when the kid needs something, if it's not necessary, no, you won't have it, and then sometimes we, as parents, because the kids, and then we allow them to have all these things that somehow don't help them to adjust in a society, to be more competent with other kids and go on with their lives, because they have everything. Kids at home don't look at the rooms, for example. It's not clean, they don't care, and so forth and so forth. And here we don't have the luxury to have empregados, the maids, to do that. So that makes a big difference between kids coming and kids here. They're completely different.
Speaking of being a father, like a Father's Day kind of thing. I mean, for me especially, it's like it's a sad day, because I lost my dad 4 years ago, and I tend to get a little bit emotional about that. He was my best friend. I remember being a little girl. My dad used to come from work, bring it just like a candy, like something small. And here I am, like just waiting for that, just waiting for that door to open for him to give me, like, you know, that candy or whatever he had in his hand. So he was very, very loving dad, very loving dad. I miss him dearly. Every day that went by, I miss my dad dearly.
Take your time.
And I'm very proud of you guys, you know, for being the dad that you guys are, because having like that bond with your kids is the best thing that you can give a kid. It's sad when you see a dad going like a parents going through a divorce where the father just forget about the kids. Just because the father's paying a child support, that father forget if he has a kid. And then when that kid start growing up, it's like the kid doesn't have the father figure. Just because you're divorced, it doesn't mean you shouldn't feel that way. That father should stand by that kid no matter what. You're the father. It's your responsibility to be the father of that kid no matter what. My question to you guys: do you guys have any advice to the father that's not responsible?
Firstly, I'm very sorry for your loss.
Yeah, thank you.
It sounds harsh, but I think I would say you should be ashamed. And I say that because children need love, and they need their fathers. And I understand that there's different types of family structures and so on, but when you have a child, you should be in your child's life. And I would say, I forget who spoke of it, the idea of your child sort of being your legacy. Think about long term, is this what you want your legacy to be? As a teacher, as a black man, I often think many of my students don't have father figures. And so naturally, and I don't like to think this way often because it seems patriarchal, but many have said, well, you know, you're a figure that I look up to. And I think that I'm not their parent, I'm not in their life, you know, for the entire duration, only for a few years. And so you think about the role that you have as a male figure, and you think as a parent, as a father, it's much more augmented. So just think about the legacy that you want to leave behind and the kind of human being and child and person that you want to live in this world. And we have to break that cycle, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, the best advice you can give someone as far as being a father is that you don't have to be the best father out there. You don't have to be a class act. You don't have to be a lawyer, a doctor, a hedge fund manager. You don't have to be a millionaire. You can be a poor man. The child just needs you to be there to provide feedback, advice. Maybe he would like to bounce some ideas off you and have a conversation. One of the things we really have to remember is that these kids are growing up in a really complex society nowadays. So they need you to be there to have discussions with them about what they should expect in life. What should they expect if they go to a prom? It's the simplest things these kids need help with. But to them, it's really complicated because they're within a social environment that's complex, right? Especially being a teenager in today's society is really complex. So if you want to be a great dad, you don't have to be the best dad. Just be a dad. Just be there. Provide them with the support that they need. If you don't have the financial support to help them, you know, chase some of their endeavors, that's okay. Try to help them navigate the information that's out there, how they can achieve their goals. All right. You might not be a professional athlete, but your kid wants to be a professional athlete. Try to help them out by not necessarily putting them in expensive athletic camps, but maybe take them to the park, go running with them, play basketball with them, play baseball with them, go swimming with them at the YMCA. Just that half hour to an hour of interaction on a daily basis will help out a lot. And I think that's focus on that and then develop from that base right there.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I actually agree with everything that was just said. And one of the things I was just thinking of is if you don't believe what was just said, go to a graduation. I've gone to several middle school and high school graduations with fathers who are not necessarily particularly involved in their children's lives, but they make it to that one event, and you should see the children's eyes light up just to know that their father is there. And so even knowing, like, you know, my father's not the best dad, it means something to just be there, even for something as big as graduation or as small as a basketball game.
Unfortunately, I've seen parents that because of child support disappear from the child's life. Some even go to Cape Verdean or Portugal or everywhere, they never come back. And imagine, you know, how those children would survive without the parent, the father. So again, you know, I agree with you what you said. You know, you need that, at least that half an hour or even 20 minutes a day to be with your child. That love is, you know, even if you don't give him the PlayStation, but give him the love, give him the 20 minutes, and that's enough. That stays forever. And that's how, you know, I think, you know, I would advise my future fathers, you know, get on the earth, give your child something, some love. You know, love is the word. And then once you have it, and then they go on their own forever.
So that's going to do it for this episode of Coffee with Kriolas. Thank you everybody for coming out and supporting us. I want to thank Manuel Gonzalez, Filipe, Oliveira, Sam TEXEIRA, and of course our Kriolas host, Ludi Amato, Sandra Lobo, Maria Gibao, and the other Kriolas that couldn't make it, Helena, Diva, and Nasilda. And also want to thank Bipla, who owns and runs the beautiful Dudley Cafe in Roxbury. Thank you for having us and for supporting all the arts programs that go on in the community. So with that, we'll see you at the next Coffee with Kriolas.